I've launched eBuddy, so the first thing we need to do is to refresh to see which Ewons are on my local network. And you can see I've got 3 Ewons locally. The 2 in blue are newly found. If we just refresh again, they'll go grey. And here at the top is the Flexy that I need to configure. So the first thing to do is to give it a sensible IP address. So select it, click Set IP, next, and then enter the IP address that is within the range of the devices connected to its LAN ports. 192.168.120.52 will do for this one. It doesn't clash then with any of the other Ewons on my local network. So this is now, as always, sending the IP address down to the Flexy and having to reboot it so that it comes back with the latest IP address. And when it's done that, the view of the list of Ewons will refresh and we'll see the new IP address for it. The eBuddy utility can also be used for checking firmware. If you don't have the latest version of firmware in any of your Flexys or Cozys, you can update it from the menu at the top there. We always recommend doing this because often the firmware might include a security patch. You want to keep you up to date on those. One thing to mention is that in order to update firmware, you don't need to be local to your devices. So if you're able to connect to your Cozys and Flexys via your eCatcher Talk2M link, then you will see them appear in the eBuddy list and can update the firmware in that way. So a couple of moments more, hopefully this will reboot. Always takes a little longer when you're watching the green bar. There we go. So we've updated our Flexy for its IP address and we can see it's now reporting the new IP address in the top there. Just do another refresh to check. There we go. So the next thing I need to do is to open the web browser within my Flexy. But what I don't need to do is to change the network adapter of my PC because we can use the easy DHCP function. So selecting the Flexy from the Tools menu, I can ask it to create me an IP address within the range of my local network adapter, and then I can just open the browser onto my Flexy. There we go. Okay, so admin default login, ADM. Remember to change that before you do any work. And then we have the language selection, and we're going to stick to English. Okay, so here we have the summary page of my Flexy. And if you saw the Cozy configuration yesterday, then you'll see it's very similar. The part that's new is this little section here on KPI, and I'll explain what that is a bit later. The key thing is that we haven't yet set up our internet connection correctly. It's picked up that I'm connected to my router, and because the default for the WAN port is DHCP, then it has picked up an IP address from my router, so I could connect to my Talk2M cloud via the cabled connection. But what I want to do is to set it up to use the Wi-Fi as the primary connection and to have the cable as a backup. So I'll run through that with the wizards. We also need to set up the VPN connection to my Talk2M account. So let's run the wizards from here and go through the quick launch. Okay, so just to be on the safe side, we can select that we want to erase everything. This isn't a bad idea. And now I can enter a name for my Flexy. And we'll call it something sensible like UK Training Rig. Administrator, username and password can be changed here if we want, but just because I never remember, I will leave it as the default. Set our time zone, and if you select an actual time zone based on the country, then of course it will update. So although it says GMT, it will know that we're actually in British summertime here, and we'll make sure that the timestamps are correct there. We also now have an option, if you want to, you can record data. Any data that you log can be recorded in UTC. This might be helpful if you're trying to compare data across multiple machines and you want them all at the same base timestamp. So that's an option there. But we'll leave it as the default. And again, we've got the ability to say which of the 4 ports built into our Flexy 205 we want to have as locally connected to our devices, the green ones, and which one is for connecting to the internet. You'll see that this bottom left-hand one has always got to be kept as the LAN port connection, so we can't change the allocation there, but all the others we can just click to change if we want to. But that's fine for how I'm running it. Okay, so that will now change my system configuration, and you'll see in the bottom here the name of my Ewon has also changed. So next wizard takes us onto the internet. As I said, what I want to do here is to connect via my Wi-Fi connection. So I'll select that. The network selection can either be done via picking from a list, or if your particular router does not broadcast its SSID, then you can enter it as a manual name here. But my router here broadcasts its name, so I can enter the user and password there, and the system will now run through and connect to the internet to make sure that my Wi-Fi connection is correct. And it failed. Okay, so if we go to the events page, it will tell us what the problem is. Okay, it says it can't reach my wireless router. This is not good news. Let's go back and try that again. But that's where to go. If something fails, then the system does give you the events list to be able to pick up the correct information. And so that's my wireless router. Enter the password. And it succeeded this time. So we have a successful connection there. Now it's going to ask me if I want to set up that second WAN port as the Ethernet connection as my fallback. So that's what we're going to do now. So we're setting up that the Ethernet connection will be used if the Wi-Fi fails. What happens is that when the system identifies that the primary connection fails, it moves across to the fallback position, and it will continue to check both connections so that as soon as the primary connection is re-enabled, then the Flexy will switch back to using that again. So this is allowing us to change the time parameters on how often and how many times it will keep checking before it falls back to the primary. Okay, so my Ethernet connection is DHCP, exactly the same setup as if it had been my primary connection. It's now going to test my Ethernet connection out through the router to the Talk2M server to make sure that it will be a suitable fallback position. And it was almost successful. Slight issue resolving the server name, but you can see how it works. I'm not going to dwell on that. Let's move on to the VPN connection because my Wi-Fi is correct. Okay, so with the VPN connection, we have these two options. E5 is the utility, or it's the device that you can purchase to be a permanent VPN server connection. So if you need to connect your data to a SCADA system, for example, then E5 allows you to create a permanent open tunnel through from one location where your SCADA is to multiple flexes in the field. The Talk2M connection is a point-to-point single connection only, and it's designed to be used for ad hoc connections, not for permanent ones. And that's what we're going to do today. So we'll move into Talk2M configuration. We have two options here. We can register with an activation key, and for a first time creation of an account, creation of an Ewon in a Talk2M account, the activation key is a very fast way to do it. But what I wanted to just show you was how to register with a name instead. So with our registering with an Ewon name, we need to know the details of our account that we are going to connect this new Ewon to. We want to give it a name and spell it correctly. And we will need to put in the username and password for an account on the, or a user on the account who has the permissions to add new cozies or flexies, add new Ewons. Okay, so next, we're not using a proxy, so it's now going to test the connection to VPN. So it first again checks the WAN connection through the Wi-Fi in this case, and then it will run through its connections there to check that we're connected to Talk2M, testing the VPN connection up to my Talk2M servers, and in a moment we get a green thumbs up. Great. So we've finished running through our wizards. We've renamed the system, we've connected and checked the internet connection and given it a fallback. We've connected it to a VPN account. So if we look at our summary page, we'll see now that we've got all of that information completed, and at the bottom we have the two green icons indicating that all is okay. And just to show you, if I go to my Talk2M account, one moment there. So my Talk2M account, and if I do a refresh now on the Ewon's connected, you'll see there it's added my new Ewon. So my new Flexy is here, it's called Training Rig 4, and you'll see it was auto-created. So this is because that name was created from the configuration of the Flexy passed up to the Talk2M account. So we've now got a Flexy and we're ready to be able to connect and configure that Flexy.